the Australia Institute, Ben Oquist. Morning to you, Ben.
Good morning, Madeline. Good morning, Michael.
We were hearing a little bit earlier from our correspondent in the US, and The Age has a story about President Trump this morning.
Yeah, front page piece suggesting that multiple diplomatic and political sources are concerned in Australia about the Trump administration's prosecution of this idea that the virus got out of a Wuhan lab rather than escape from the wild. And these diplomatic sources saying this is undermining Australia's case to push for an inquiry, or actually they're pushing for a review or an assessment of what went wrong, and undermining Australia's case to do something about the wet markets or the wildlife trade. A really interesting piece because it's multiple diplomatic and political sources saying that Australia is very concerned with what our biggest ally, in this case the Trump administration's in charge of that ally at the moment, is saying and prosecuting about this kind of conspiracy theory about the Wuhan lab.
And even this morning, again, we have Mike Pompeo, the US Secretary of State, been doubling down and repeating, giving voice to this theory, yet again, which you say will complicate all of these international efforts to try to find realistically just what happened in China. Yeah,
obviously, to actually find out what happened and prevent mistakes happening in the future is a big diplomatic effort, and that involves all countries working together. And when you've got the Trump administration persecuting what seems like a conspiracy theory, it really undermines that. It's a fascinating story because the story goes on to suggest that the diplomatic sources have been very worried because there's been a lot of stories prosecuted in a rival paper, the Daily Telegraph, that seem to suggest that the Daily Telegraph's getting the drop from the US Embassy in Australia rather than the material from Australian intelligence sources. Interesting, though, because the Telegraph had pretty much exactly the same story on the front page yesterday, warning about a real concern amongst Australia's diplomats and senior political figures about the Trump administration's prosecution of this case.
Yeah, we just need the evidence, don't we? I mean, you need to sort of see, if you're going to make those sorts of claims, you need to see the evidence. Let's take you to another couple of stories today in a couple of papers about Andrew Constance's 24-hour rethink over whether he is going to stand in Eden Monaro. What have the papers got today on that?
Well, it's front page of a lot of papers, as you can imagine, and Phil Courier's got it off the front page of the Financial Review in particular, and just what a chaos this by-election has turned out to be. And we started off with a rival, seemingly a pleasant rivalry between high-profile Balalaro for the National Party and high-profile Andrew Constance for the Liberal Party, looking like it was giving the coalition a very good chance of winning this by-election. But it's turned into complete debacle. Balalaro announcing he was going to run, or seemingly was going to run, and then pulling out. Constance actually announcing he was going to run and then not. I think it's as Lee Sales on 7:30 Report said, there's one thing that coronavirus can't stop. It's brawling in the National Party in her exchange with Laura Tingle last night on 7:30. And it really, and there's leaked text messages coming out from the Nationals that are kind of white-anting McCormack from Balalaro and now others. And it's all a very chaotic start to what was meant to be a by-election that the government could make history with. I think they're probably still favourites in this by-election, given the popularity of the current Morrison government in times of a crisis. But you couldn't have asked for a worse start for a by-election.
Yes, I think you talked about pleasant rivalries between Andrew Constance and John Barilaro. I think it's completely the opposite now. Just quickly, Nikki Sather sums it up very nicely in her weekly column in The Australian this morning. She says Gladys Berejiklian should not have to call for the resignations of John Barilaro and Andrew Constance. They should do the right thing by her and resign their ministries, serve until the next election, then quietly disappear. It has been politics at its most brutal and most farcical. And it reminded me, and I think you were in Canberra at the same time as me back in the 90s, of Mal Meninga's short-lived campaign. A lot of comparisons between that and Andrew Constance's short-lived campaign for Eden Monaro as well.
Yeah, that famous Mal Meninga interview with Chris Uhlmann actually at the time, where he didn't get through a paragraph before he resigned on air. Well, Constance maybe went a little bit further, but an unwieldy press conference yesterday when he resigned. But I think in the end, probably who's the loser is Gladys is probably the winner. She doesn't face a by-election in New South Wales. And the loser is the National Party and the LNP at the federal level, because they really thought they had a chance of making history and winning this by-election. They still could. Remember that they got a swing to them at the last election, the coalition government. They didn't put in that many resources because they didn't think they could win the seat. But it's going to be a tight contest now, you'd imagine.
Yep.
Yeah, it was all a bit of a sit of your pants 48 hours or so in that particular electorate. Our final story today about some artists, Ben.
Yeah, I had a look at this piece in the Sydney Morning Herald, a new public art prize, the Caldor Public Art Prize, taking a bit of a different approach at this time. I think an interesting one. You know, a lot of talk about how much artists are suffering economically in coronavirus, and they miss out on some of the government schemes, and really important part of our society and economy. And this looks at a new art prize and features Janet Lawrence, one of Australia's famous contemporary artists who looks a lot at nature, and a wonderful artist, about a new art show, if you like, where famous artists are asked to write down something, either handwritten or typing, that the public can do. And Janet's suggestion is what the public can do is go out and listen to plants and listen to nature and see if you can hear them talk. And a kind of a wonderful way that she suggests we can connect with nature and the interconnectedness of all things. And I thought particularly appropriate at this time. And she points out it's a good way of getting away from your screens.
Yeah, or she should call Prince Charles. He knows how to talk to plants, apparently. He's boasted about that in the past.
Yeah, I know, and we could make fun of it, but it's a wonderful artist.
Yeah, don't be so snooty about it.
No, I talk to
Maybe
plants
it's a
all the time.
lovely
No,
idea.
I have serious discussions with weeds in the backyard every morning. Don't you?
Yeah,
I don't, actually, strangely. What
don't you?
kind of weed are you talking about there, Michael? It sounds like something else.
I'm not a big talker to plants, but I saw an exhibition of Janet's at the MCA, and I think, particularly at this time when we are spending a lot of time with our screens at home, and children are particularly, a special public art prize that it has artists speaking to the public about the way that they can engage is a really important thing, and remind us about the importance of art when the art industry is doing it so tough.
And that's the most serious point to finish with. The arts community, the creatives need all the help all the rest of us can offer, Ben. So true.
Tick, tick.
Tick, tick.
Yeah, indeed.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Madeline. Thanks, Michael.
Now, most of Australia's coronavirus patients have now recovered.